All right, let's jump right into this deep dive. We've got a really specific piece of source material today. It's a fishing forecast document just for the Folly Beach Pier and just for one day, June 11th, 2025.
That's right. And you know, even though it's just one forecast, one place, one day, if you really unpack it, there's a surprising amount of useful stuff in there. Gives you a good sense of the potential.
Absolutely. So that's our mission, right? Take this document, this snapshot, and pull out the key bits for you.
Yep.
We'll look at the weather, the tides, the bite times, you know, the rhythm of the water.
And what fish might be around, what the source suggests using.
Exactly. Yeah. And any tips it offers. Let's build that picture of that specific day on the pier, just using what this document tells us.
Sounds like a plan. So Folly Beach Pier, June 11th, 2025. Let's start with the backdrop, the weather.
Okay, yeah. What's the sky looking like in this forecast?
Well, the document says light rain, pretty much expected throughout the day.
Okay, so maybe not a beach day, but could be okay for fishing. Temperature?
It's predicting a high of 82 Fahrenheit, that's about 28 Celsius, and a low of 74 Fahrenheit, so 23 Celsius.
Decent temps.
Yeah, but it specifically notes the humidity. It says it's going to feel warmer, like between 80 and 89 Fahrenheit. Sticky.
Right. That feels like temperature. So warm and damp then.
Definitely. It also mentions moderate wind coming from the southwest at about 9 miles per hour.
Okay.
And the UV index is moderate, a 5. So the main takeaway seems to be, be ready for heat, humidity, and that steady light rain.
Good to know. That definitely shapes how you'd prepare. Okay, so we've got the atmospheric conditions. Now, what about the fishing potential itself, the when and why? The source says June 11th is generally favorable.
Yeah, it does. And this is where it starts connecting things. It points out the full moon phase is happening around then.
Okay, full moon.
And the document specifically says that contributes to stronger tides. That link between the moon phase and tide strength, that's a key assumption in this type of forecast.
Right. Stronger tides. And the thinking there is that moves more water, stirs things up.
Precisely. The logic presented is that stronger flow moves bait around, gets the predatory fish more active, more likely to feed.
Makes sense.
And the forecast actually gives specific predicted times for when this activity might peak.
The bite times. What does it list?
Correct. It uses Solunar charts as its basis for these predictions. It lists major bite times. Those are supposed to be the best windows as 12:14 a.m. to 2:14 a.m.
Middle of the night.
And 12:4 p.m. to 2:40 p.m. So early afternoon too.
Okay. Major bite times. Are there others?
Yep. It also includes minor bite times on a secondary periods. Those are listed as 5:02 a.m. to 7:02 a.m., so early morning.
Dawn patrol.
And 8:18 p.m. to 10:18 p.m. in the evening. So you've got these predicted windows spread through the day and night.
Gives you something to aim for, timing-wise. Now, you mentioned stronger tides because of the full moon. What are the actual predicted tide times and levels for that day?
Okay, the document lays out the tide schedule. Low tide is very early, 2:48 a.m., and it's pretty low, 0.38 feet.
Right.
Then high tide comes in at 8:58 a.m. up to 4.48 feet.
Decent swing.
Then another low tide at 2:38 p.m., and this one's even lower, just 0.23 feet.
Wow, almost drained.
Yeah. And then the final high tide listed for the day is 9:3 p.m., and it pushes way up to 5.93 feet.
Whoa, nearly 6 feet. That evening high is much higher than the morning one.
It is. And that ties into something else the document mentions, the tidal coefficient.
Tidal coefficient. What's that, according to the forecast?
So this is interesting. It gives two values. For the morning, the coefficient is 68. But for the evening, it jumps way up to 117.
68 to 117. Big difference. What does a higher number mean here?
The document explains it pretty clearly. A higher coefficient means a stronger tidal flow, more powerful currents, more water movement.
So that evening tide isn't just higher. The prediction says the flow itself will be much stronger then.
That's exactly what the forecast indicates. Considerably more powerful movement predicted for that evening period compared to the morning.
That jump from 68 to 117, that sounds like it could really change how the water moves around the pier structure.
You'd think so.
And the source links stronger flow to better fishing. Does it sort of imply the evening tide with that high coefficient might be particularly good?
Well, it doesn't explicitly say evening is better, but look at the pieces it provides. You've got the full moon influence mentioned, then that significantly higher evening coefficient 117 paired with the very high tide nearly 6 feet, and there's also an evening minor bite time window that overlaps.
Right, 8:18 p.m. to 10:18 p.m.
Yeah. So the combination of factors it highlights, it definitely paints a picture of increased potential during that later period. based on the forecast's own logic.
Okay, that's a really key insight drawn from the data points. So we've got the weather, we've got the timing, and the water movement especially strong later on. Now the fun part, who's biting? What fish does the forecast suggest might be around, and how should you target them?
Right. The document lists the species typically caught off the pier there in June. It's quite a list, actually.
Like what?
Redfish, spotted sea trout, Jack Crevalle, both Spanish and king mackerel, sheepshead, black drum, bluefish, whiting, flounder, and pompano.
Wow, okay. That's a lot of variety. Does the forecast give any specific pointers for any of these on this particular day?
It adds a few useful notes, like it mentions redfish often chase bait along the shoreline, spotted sea trout also active inshore.
Okay.
So thinking about that southwest wind prediction, maybe that influences where the bait gets pushed relative to the pier. That's where the source implies you'd find those fish.
Good point, connecting the wind back. What else?
It notes Jack Crevalle are known for a strong fight. Always good to remember if you hook one.
Definitely. What about pier favorites like sheepshead?
Yes. Sheepshead and black drum get a specific mention. It says they feed on crustaceans and bivalves like barnacles and mussels right off the pier pilings.
Right on the structure.
Exactly. And that's crucial, especially when you think back to that strong tidal flow we were just talking about.
How so? Why does the flow matter for fishing the pilings?
Well, the source's logic is that stronger flow stimulates activity. So with that really big tide swing and that high coefficient, especially later in the day, the water rushing around those pilings will be moving pretty fast.
Right.
The document suggests this could make the feeding activity right there on the structure more intense during those periods of strong flow.
That's a fantastic connection, linking the tide strength data from the forecast directly to a specific species feeding habit around the pier structure itself. Great nugget. What about bait?
The general recommendation in the document is pretty straightforward. Live bait is usually best for success overall. Makes sense for a lot of those predatory fish on the list.
Sure.
But for sheepshead specifically, it calls out fiddler crabs and clams as effective choices.
The classic sheepshead baits.
It also notes the typical June water temperature there is in the mid to high 70s Fahrenheit.
Warm water.
Yeah. And the document says this means there's usually plenty of natural bait around, which helps explain why you see such a variety of game fish species showing up.
Gotcha. Warm water, lots of food, draws in the fish. It all ties together. Now, I think the document also had some practical pier fishing tips for a day like this.
It did. It kind of pulls some of the key implications together. First, it really emphasizes paying close attention to the tides, both incoming and outgoing. Reinforces that idea that fish often get most active during these moving water periods.
Right.
And it specifically flags that strong tidal coefficient on June 11th as indicating good water movement to watch.
Circling back to the tide schedule and those coefficient numbers we discussed. Makes sense.
Exactly. Second, it advises matching your bait to your target species.
Yeah.
Reinforcing the live bait idea for many, but also those specific baits for sheepshead.
Fiddlers and clams.
Right, and it gives some really important specific guidance for sheepshead, too. Fish close to the pilings, use those fiddler crabs or clams, and this is key, circle hooks are required.
That's a crucial regulation or best practice note. Good catch.
Yeah, definitely important. And finally, considering that weather forecast.
The rain and humidity.
Yeah, it reminds you to be prepared, dress right for the conditions, protect your gear from the rain, and it also gives that standard but always wise advice. Check local reports just before you go.
Like from bait shops or the pier office.
Exactly. Get the absolute latest scoop on what's happening right then and there. Conditions can always change.
Wow. Okay. Stepping back, it's pretty impressive how much we could pull out of just this one document.
Yeah.
A single day's forecast, but based purely on its contents. We've got a really detailed picture for June 11th, 2025 on the Folly Beach Pier.
Yeah.
We've got the feel of the weather, sticky, rainy. We've got the rhythm of the water, those tide swings, the predicted bite times, that really strong evening flow. We know the likely fish around, even a bit about how they might behave according to the source.
And practical tips grounded in those predictions. What's really neat is how the document itself gives you the pieces to connect the dots. The full moon context, that predicted surge in tidal strength later in the day, the bite windows lining up, and even pointing to species like sheepshead that live right where that strong flow will be happening around the pilings.
Yeah, putting those pieces together from the source definitely gives you a richer picture than just, say, looking at a list of tide times.
Totally. This specific forecast really acts like a guide, doesn't it? It prompts you to think about how all these different elements play together: the moon, the tide's power, the time of day, wind, even matching your bait to where and how the fish are likely feeding, like around those pilings, as it highlights.
It really does.
And thinking about that guide, that forecast gives us that really stark difference in the tidal coefficient, right? 68 in the morning, jumping to 117 in the evening.
Yeah, big leap.
And the source tells us higher means stronger flow, which it links to moving bait and stimulating fish. So just using that logic, the logic presented in the forecast, how might that big increase in predicted water movement later in the day truly reshape the potential fishing experience around the pier compared to the morning session?
That's a great question to ponder, based entirely on the information and reasoning provided in this specific document. It really makes you think about applying the forecast's own internal logic.
Exactly. Food for thought when using these kinds of detailed predictions.
Well, that was a really insightful deep dive into just one forecast document. Hopefully walking through it like this helps you see how much detail and potential connection is often packed inside if you take the time to unpack it.
Yeah, it's always interesting to dig into the source material like this.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.